my baby's familiar laugh rang out. Just as carefully, the monster put this disgusting creature in the crib in my Alice's place, carefully covered her with a blanket, and turned his head to me. Through the long black hair, I managed to see only her eyes and a terrible smile, and I was covered by a wave of fear so strong that I was able to overcome the numbness, screamed and rushed to the crib. And, of course, I woke up tangled in a blanket that was suffocating me. And also, I wet myself. Of course, the room was dark again, no moonlight in the window. The baby squeaked when she woke up from my scream, but I didn't dare to approach her for another 5 minutes. I was afraid to see there instead of my girl a terrible lump of rotten flesh swarming. But the maternal instinct, nevertheless, won out, and I looked into the crib, and then picked up Alice, who was screaming. After that night, I felt like I was going crazy. It seemed to me that my baby had changed unpleasantly. No, outwardly she remained the same cute baby, and laughed just as fervently. But now her laugh sounded somehow fake. Like a cracked porcelain bell. And from time to time, when I sharply shifted my gaze to her, it seemed to me that for a moment a malicious expression flashed on her angelic face. Of course, my friends and my psychologist blamed everything on stress and lack of sleep. But the fact that my daughter was having fun with someone, even when I wasn't in the room, was an undoubted reality. It got to the point that I started to flinch at the sounds of her laughter, which scratched my ears with its false notes. Then it got even worse. It began to seem that when I was in another room, and not in the bedroom, her laughter began to move, as if Alina was running from corner to corner, quickly slapping her bare feet on the floor, making her way to the door to the kitchen, where I was drinking tea, or around the corner of the hallway. At such moments, I would explode in a panic and run to the crib. Of course, Alice continued to lie peacefully in her bed, looking at me with her angelic innocent eyes, or snuffled, immersed in a deep sleep. But I had the feeling that all this was a sham. It's just something trying to drive me crazy. I quarreled with all my friends and doctors, who, seeing my condition, tried to help me, convinced me that all these were hallucinations, that I needed to undergo treatment, to rest. I brushed them all off, retreated to the apartment with my daughter. And then one day I was going to bed. I was already in bed, glanced at the crib and reached for the night light to turn it off, flipped the switch and screamed. In the darkness, 2 shining green eyes looked at me from the crib. Right from the place where my daughter's head was lying on the pillow. I immediately turned on the lamp again. The child was sleeping as if nothing had happened, even her breathing was almost inaudible. I blamed it all on my nerves and turned off the night light again. And again, 2 glowing spots flashed in the depths of the crib. It was as if my child had suddenly opened his eyes, staring at me through the darkness. Feeling the invisible fingers of horror and panic clutching my throat, I lit the lamp again, and again, I saw only a sleeping child. I turned it off, 2 eyes stared at me. So I clicked again and again, feeling that a wave of madness was beginning to overwhelm me, just a little more, and I would drown in it. Every time, out of the darkness, my child, or what he pretended to be, looked at me with green eyesores. And then, once again, when the lamp went out, the eyes shone right in front of my bed. It was as if this something suddenly appeared next to me, looking over the edge of the bed. My nerves could not stand it, I screamed and, grabbing the night light, hit them with all my might at the creepy lights. In response, there was only a crunch and the soft sound of a small body falling. Shaking like an aspen leaf, I somehow got to the switch on the wall, turned on the light in the bedroom. Against the wall, in an unnatural position, in a spreading scarlet puddle, lay a child's body, thrown away by my blow. The light was reflected in the open, frozen eyes. She was dead, no doubt. But I was sure it wasn't my daughter. This is her pathetic copy, a vile creature who only pretended to be Alice. I was afraid to go to her to check it out. Make sure you're right. Then somehow I overcame myself, went over and, picking up the corpse that had already begun to cool down, carefully put it back in the crib. I covered her eyes with my palm and covered her with a blanket, as if she was just sleeping peacefully. As if in a stupor, she tiptoed into the kitchen, and just sat there in the dark, staring into the corner. I was brought out of my stupor by the rapid slapping of bare feet on the floor, and the familiar children's laughter right at the door. I glanced there and froze. A pair of glowing green eyes peeked out from behind the jamb of the opening, not far from the floor. More laughter. And then it came over me. The floodgates of madness opened, and a dark wave swept over me, pulled me to the bottom of reason. With a scream, she grabbed a knife, and like lightning she pounced on this creature, shredding and tearing with her hands this piece of rotten slimy flesh. Blood and pus sprayed in all directions, covering me from head to toe. I furiously cut, until I let go. Then she collected all these ugly pieces in a garbage bag and, throwing it in the center of the kitchen, again took her position on the stool, blankly looking with unseeing eyes into the corner, and not paying attention to the faint stirring and rustling of polyethylene. I don't know how long I've been sitting like this. It's been dawn outside the window for a long time. Suddenly, an avalanche of disgusting sounds reached me through the window. Children were laughing in the street. But I knew that these were not real children. I caught disgusting fake notes in their laughter. I was covered again. I vaguely remember what happened next. I grabbed a knife and ran out into the street. With a scream, she burst into the playground where several children were playing. No, not children. There were several large disgusting pieces of rotting flesh, covered with pus, mucus, and worms. And they laughed hideously, driving me crazy. I started stabbing and cutting right and left. The creatures gaped black holes instead of mouths, uttering screams and screams, tried to run away, fell and crawled around. They grabbed me, twisting my arms, hit me on the head, and I fell into oblivion. I woke up already in the hospital, in silence and safety. And you can't hear these vile sounds here. From news reports. Yesterday, a terrible incident occurred in one of the districts of the city. A woman with a knife broke into the playground and began to strike the children there. The woman was detained and tied up by residents of nearby houses. 2 children were killed by her hand, 2 more were taken to the hospital in serious condition. According to eyewitnesses, the attacker was covered in blood and screamed terribly. She was immediately identified as a resident of one of the neighboring houses. Subsequently, the police found another terrible find in her apartment. In a garbage bag in the kitchen was found the mutilated and dismembered corpse of a child, who, as it turned out, was the daughter of a woman.